great news that we'll be back in 2020.
And it's interesting to note that we had 198 entries this year, which is the biggest we've had in many, many, many years. So bringing it down to what we have, 78 pieces or something like that in the show. So this is a very large show for the kind of show it is. And it's been very, very exciting to be once again in our own museum.
Yeah.
Well, we were going to start with the Merit Awards, and then we thought that we had to build up to it on awards night. So Anna Jo, you're the first in the winner's circle, the best of show. Would you lead us to your award-winning piece? Tell us about your techniques, and if you don't give us at least a few words, I'm going to ask you some difficult questions. So the award-winning piece is the one with the purple ribbon.
Taking a picture of the lighthouse, getting all centered. Everybody went to that one spot there and did that, so it seemed perfect.
Okay. So technique-wise, you saw an image, you said, this is what I'd like to paint, then you captured it in your mind,
Yes.
then headed off to safety, came back, took some photographs. How many hours did it take?
This was a slow pokey painting because I painted every little brick in there,
Okay.
which is a little, I didn't mean to, I just meant to suggest a couple of them, but I have a habit of getting a little detail oriented. Before I knew it, I was painting every little brick.
And the media that you used was?
Acrylic.
Acrylic.
Yes, totally acrylic on canvas, on a 30 by 40 inch stretched canvas.
And as long as we have you in this room, there's another piece right behind Jeff. That's another one.
Alrighty, this is, yeah, thank you, Kathy. You're Vanna now, huh?
I know, we'll flip some letters later. I'll take a W and a line and an E, you know.
Is that the same lighthouse?
No, this is a different lighthouse. Oddly enough, they're both red, but let me get out of the way. This one is a Jupiter. And we saw a bunch of crab traps in the foreground here. Right to the left, there's a restaurant. We were looking across the water over here to the Jupiter Lighthouse. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I guess it was being worked on, so I painted it with a cage on it. I didn't know it wasn't supposed to be there. And I was thinking, and when I got I got kind of crazy with the detail. And this is also acrylic. It's also a 30 by 40 inch stretch canvas.
I would like to point out to you,
Yeah.
you're not to touch the paintings in a museum.
Okay.
But it is so realistic, like you just want to step in there.
Oh, thank you. Well, I pretty much moved and invented and slid things around, and I just had fun, you know.
Yeah, you're so good at that, at always getting like your depth and your distance really well.
Oh, that's kind of you. Thank you.
Which
Is-
I have no
Does-
skills that way at all.
Does
Is it-
anyone have a question for the artist?
Is it kind of a layered approach you take? You start with one thing and then you build on top?
Essentially, I usually start in the background and work towards the foreground, usually. In this case, I kept trying to, I kept moving boxes. I kept thinking, okay, so I'm always thinking in terms of composition, always figuring out, okay, so where does the eye come into the painting? Where does it go first? And how do I keep the eye interested to stay in the painting? So I kind of moved some boxes around so that the eye can sort of go through without feeling, you know, and you can wander back there, and then hopefully there's enough interest in the lights and the colors that I use will pull you back and forth through the painting. That's my intention. So that's why I kept moving things around, and the same thing with the shadows and the rocks and stuff like that. I'm always thinking in terms of how would the eye follow it.
Work.
My name is Ranju Bakrania, and I first started at Eastern Florida College, and Nancy Dillon was one of my teachers, and I've learned a lot from her.
Very good, yeah.
And then I had several other teachers, but I was inspired. I did figures and landscape and everything, but I got inspired into abstracts. There was a young girl, she's no longer with us, and she was doing abstracts, and I do miss her. And I got just hung up on it. And this is the one I did very spontaneously. I paint intuitively, and I kind of sketch, and I start from the sketch, but then it's paint, brush, and the paint. I just go with it wherever it takes me. I reach a certain point and I say I'm done. And mainly in my abstracts, I want some kind of shapes, some lines, color, and make sure I have lights and darks. I've called it my land, because the day of the submission, I thought this was a good one. Actually, I did put it against a master copy by Suzanne, and I said, what do I see in it? Maybe can I see or I imagine.
Okay, well, with your cash award that you received, you could buy a camera.
I already bought so much paint.
Oh, she bought paint, okay.
Actually,
bought
I
paint.
bought it before I got the money.
Yeah.
Well,
It was exactly around that much.
well, congratulations again on a beautiful
Thank you.
piece of work.
Very good.
Next, let's see, is Susan Martin here? Oh, there she is. Oh, we gotta go back there.
Back in here. Here we go.
You have to move a lot. Get some exercise.
One of the things I want everyone to notice is that in the other room, there's a Susan Martin painting that was a purchase award from when?
The very first, the Artist Forum became the Strawbridge Art League. It had two lots. One was within the museum and one was when it took on its own independence. But it's the same organization. And that one won the very first Artist Forum.
Which was in 19... You were a teenager, right?
Yeah, I was only, yes, it's,
1979?
or something like that.
1979, that's 40 years ago.
That word well. Anyway, yeah, oh, this is kind of nice to have it represented. This is an acrylic painting, canvas. I work from my photographs. I take lots of photographs the way some people use a sketchbook. I seldom paint the whole photograph. Most of them are discarded, but I use them, I put them up, and then I go through my photographs and select sections. Generally, it turns out to be a small area of a whole photograph. I like this. Does it work as a vertical? Does it work as a horizontal? Does it need to be big, small? Do I need to change the colors? Whatever. This was part of, this image is part of a much larger photograph that, of course, was neglected because I just keep cropping in, because I like it to come so close that instead of looking at it as a thing, these are vines and leaves, which of course you recognize, but when you leave out the context, you leave out the other trees, the other bushes, the rest of the tree, then you begin to concentrate on the patterns, the textures, the light, and so forth. And so, in my mind, I'm painting an abstract. Because when I'm painting, it's just one small area. And I don't really even necessarily know what I'm painting. I'm concentrating on that. And I'm looking at the way it fits together, not what it is. Of course you know what it is, but I feel free to, believe it or not, change colors. to exaggerate colors, to change the contrast, to do whatever it is. What I'm interested in is, does this composition work? And so I start with a photograph, and people say, oh, it looks just like the photograph, but if you saw the photograph, it doesn't, because it becomes a thing into itself in the painting process. It's done with lots and lots and lots of layers of thin paint. I use acrylic, but mine, I don't know how thick that is applied, probably not very thickly. Mine is just almost like milk. It's so thin, and in order to get brilliant colors, it requires a lot of layers. But in the process of applying a lot of layers, then you don't have to cover up all of that layer. You can back off, and if you like that, and leave that little bit or that little edge. It can soften it. It can give it a feeling of volume. Or shading, because the acrylic dries very quickly, especially when it's that thin. So when I could no longer shade as I had in oils, which I started with in school, this kind of just developed as a way of modeling it, changing the brilliance, working, because you see through the layers. The layers are not opaque. And so they build an intensity, and if you look real closely, there are really lots and lots of little skinny edges that just kind of blend together. It's done with one little pointy brush, and that's the way I paint.
And what do you call this?
I called it marriage because there are basically two trees, one with orange leaves and one with green leaves, and different kinds of vines. And the vines just tie them together. And I like the fact that they were bound together, even though they were, and I know you're not looking at different trees, but you are seeing that combination, and then these things, you know, it's just a different kind of vine also bind them. And of course one of my favorite parts are these, like stained glass, when the space between the trees and it's backlit. It's from something I probably took 300 photographs in North Carolina on that trip, and the color was wonderful, and the photograph is really pretty ordinary, but you know, that's what you can do when you put it on the computer. You can play with it, you can change it, you can blow it up, you can eliminate and crop and crop and crop until it becomes a thing that's separate. And that's what I do practically. And you'll see a resemblance to the one in the other room, but through the years they've become a little more complex. And then that one, which was also with acrylics, but a simpler format.
They wondered where they were, and I said they're
I
behind the
put
green leaves.
lizards in one of my paintings when my son was doing a science project many years ago on lizards, and so they just kind of went into the painting.
So if you haven't looked at this painting close, do that, and then back up and really see the power of it.
It's fun.
That was exquisite.
Any questions?
Beautiful.
Yeah, I just wanted to
Yes.
ask you if you were thinking about the seasons. I know it's 2 trees and you've got a lot.
Well,
it looks like
It was
on
fall.
the right, and it looks like
I don't know why I didn't, and I suspect this leaf just calls it quits. I think it's kind of hard to know what leaf this is a combination of. Some of them just turn white. See, like this did.
Yeah.
And they give up the ghost, and others have to go through the beauty of the reds and everything.
Susan, you should have called it Divine Marriage.
Oh, well, it's not too late. I've changed many of her before.
I thought it
The artist has taken a great deal of trouble to find pieces of fabric to stitch in here to create this scene with all these horses.
That is absolutely
It's
amazing.
much like the tapestries that you'd find in 1400s, 1500s in Europe.
It's very good. I'm gonna get close. Look at the stitches. This is all cloth.
Or ink or dye or anything except fabric that makes up this quilt. It's purely made from fabric that I bought at one of 4 different quilt stores. So I make my rounds to make sure I can find the colors I need. But all of my quilts start off as a drawing that I do on my iPad. and I use different photos for reference. So this one I looked at probably 20 different photos, and I kind of picked and chose pieces from each photo that made sense where I wanted them in the composition. So not one horse here was photographed as is. Like I moved legs around, I moved heads around, just whatever I had to do to make it work in the composition, and then that's what I drew. Then after I finish my drawing on the iPad, I take it into my computer and make a full color, fully fleshed out template that I use to pick color reference and also design each individual piece of fabric. Once the template's finished, I use the colors that I put into it in Illustrator, and I print out little swatches. They actually look like paint swatches, but I just print them off on my printer. And I take those with me to the store, and I use them to match color and value. So I use my phone, the camera on my phone, to make sure that I'm getting the right value, and then I'm able to just look at it to get the color. But that makes sure that the value is correct in the finished piece. I use a device called a Cricut, and that's C-R-I-C-U-T, Cricut. And it's kind of like a home printer that has an X-Acto blade, and it cuts all of my pieces for me. So I've been doing this for 15 years now. I'm only sewing for one, but I've been doing applique fabric pictures for 15 years. And I've only gotten the Cricut last year, so this is a new development for me, and I can't tell you how much I love it because it saves me hours and hours and hours. But yeah, up until last year when I got my Cricut, I cut everything by hand, either with an X-Acto knife or scissors. And it was to the point where my hand would be cramped at the end of the day from cutting for 8 hours in a day. So I'm in love with my Cricut. But the main interaction, the first thing that you see, is the horse meeting the farm dog. And so that's the primary story. That's the brightest part of the whole picture. It has the lightest value. It's the biggest part of the whole picture. That's what you see first when looking at the quilt. But the secondary story here, and the reason that the horse was able to meet the dog in the first place, is that the men in the back had to stop the cart, and the reason for stopping the cart is to fix some problem with one of the harnesses on the rear horse. So they're the genesis for this main story that I really wanted to tell, but they're downplayed in this quilt.
You're in the winner's circle tonight.
So it's not a self-portrait?
All my paintings are self-portraits, whether they look like me or not.
Next, as long as they're right here.
I said fabulous, and the art piece is nice too.
Did you have an idea of what it was going to be, or did it just evolve?
Actually, what started first, this is an old tin water pitcher underneath here. So it started with that, and then I saw this at a garage sale. I think it's really from IKEA, so then I stuck this on that. And then this is a little butterfly cake, Lazy Susan. So I stuck it on that. And then I found this at another shop, and I went, that might be kind of cool.
Evolve.
Right. Like in my living room, there's always something I'm working on, and there's stuff scattered everywhere, so the kids just push it off the dining room table and find enough room to eat and roll their eyes. And then I have friends who bring me stuff, the kids bring me things, and but you do have to kind of figure out overall what you're trying to say. You can't just randomly stick stuff on there. It has to. So do you all hear that? She's got a list of things she can
If
look
you're
for.
interested, when I started this, and I've also worked from photographs, and this is probably my most unusual piece in that I had to think as I was doing it, which that's part of the reason that it took me so darn long to do it. But I work from photographs looking, like Susan said, just for lights and darks and composition and contrast, and I love textures. And I everybody asks me what my technique is. This is my stamp pad that I keep re-inking. It's all dried out now. And then I use mostly this brush. This little brush.
Oh gosh.
Sometimes, and I have one a little bit bigger, but it wouldn't fit back. This sometimes I can blend with Is it permanent ink? What kind of ink are you using?
It's what I've been using for years. It's made by Sanford. It's permanent stamp head ink and it rolls on. Well, they quit making that maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but I had a few bottles left and I just finished the last bit of it on this.
Unfortunately for you, I have some of those bottles in my house.
And
The
I might
permanent
do
black.
that.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
That means I have to do more. Another
Yes,
one.
you do.
This was my excuse for this being my last one. But anyway, I started with a photograph of an uprooted tree, and I just like the shapes and stuff. And I meant to bring a picture of my original photograph, but I forgot it. And then I knew I was going to call it Uprooted. So then I thought, after I got it drawn in, it occurred to me, I could put things in here that I have seen as being uprooted in our culture and around the world. So that's why there's all this weird stuff in here. The refugee situation, there's a Syrian flag, the ISIS flag, that's what was going on for the past 3 years. That's how long it took me. Brexit, the British flag, and the European Union. Of course, the American flag, the Constitution, Lady Liberty here,
That's incredible.
opioids, crisis. There's a marijuana leaf, there's an assault rifle, there's a handgun, there are various religious symbols, and the restroom labels for the public restrooms. What else? Here's my list, if anybody wants.
Is that something we could keep at the gift shop too for people?
Oh,
that-
that's a good idea.
Maybe wants some.
For your other work too, for all your work?
I started doing this in 1989. Before that, I was doing pen and ink. And then I experimented with ballpoint, and I've got one of my ballpoint pieces.
You have
over
2
there.
pieces
And
in
the-
there.
And the cows are also in there, and that was this dry brush.
Again, that's from the Artist Forum days. This is from
Yeah, that goes back.
a long time ago. So Becky Berenson has been around for a while too.
Very, very long.
Again, of course, she won those awards when she was a teenager also.
What kind of paper?
This is illustration board, hot press illustration board.
So the white areas, is that just bare paper?
Yes,
Yes.
and I can use an eraser. I do, it takes many, many layers. And I usually start with the really darks and then just kind of go from there and work my way out. And then I keep going back, darkening, lightening, just.
So what is your plan when your fellow artist runs out of ink? Well,
Finds people that can.
Yeah.
I may have some too, Dick.
I think it's from my dad's office he had in
Well, I
1960.
went on
So how do I paint? I paint in oils. I make my own paint from scratch. I work with dry pigment. I have a very limited palette. The dry pigment includes titanium white. It includes a transparent permanent yellow. I have about 3 or 4 different reds. The one that I used for this one was vermilion red. And then the blues, I have 2 blues, a phthalo blue red shade and a phthalo blue green shade.